Well, motor car racing at Bathurst is fair competition. Quite thrilling to see one car trying to overtake the other on a bend, and the roar and the noise. But I'm now going to go over a different sort of roar, a destroying roar. And I believe that the Australian Tax Office are absolutely right to be investigating the Hales family, because Bruce Hales has been deliberately destroying people in his church because they've posed some sort of a threat. I got involved with Jim Hutchinson's matters and Louise, his wife, simply because his father, Phil, and local brother, Mike Hughes, were destroying them, basically, psychologically. You say they weren't going around with a sword and hitting them and booting them. No, they wouldn't get away with that. But they do it in the mind and defame them and tell me what terrible people they are, especially Jim. So I stood up and said to Mike Hughes, I don't agree with you, mate. Jim's a good guy. And what's wrong with that? Why not stand up for your brother when he's in trouble? Same with Ray Story. Ray Story reached out to me when he was in the jail. He was being destroyed when he should have been comforted and given every support. He had respect for the brethren position. But I've just heard that he's left. He's left, and he's left the position he's been withdrawn from, or shut up or something. I'm not quite sure what. But the Nottingham brethren need to review. Why? You can't just pulverise somebody, cause them to react, and then punish them for that reaction, because it's a natural reaction when you're under pressure. And we love each other, don't we? And we certainly should in an assembly, in a church. So if somebody gets a little bit reactive, you don't say, you're contentious, that's serious, you're withdrawn from, and then get all the brethren to agree with you. That's mafia tactics, that's bully tactics, that's intimidation. And it makes all the other brethren mighty scared about ever coming up against anybody who tells whatever bullshit they might want to tell. So I'm taking issue with all this. And I did do back in 2014, and took matters to Bruce Hales in Boston, having spoken to John Anderson, and said, look, I'm going over to New York. I'm working with Polo Ralph Lauren, one of our best accounts in our business. It's turning into a super account. And I wondered whether to drop up to Boston to see Bruce Hales. John Anderson said, I would if I were you. So off I trotted. And of course, just before the meeting on Saturday, I got a loudspeaker system. Planes had been delayed, so I had to trot off and see Bruce Hales with my wife in his house at University Avenue, I think it was, in Boston, and got lambasted for advocating for Ray Story, who wanted to come back into fellowship as soon as he'd left the jail. I'm not sure that people should be booted out of fellowship for going to jail. It was an inadvertent mistake, and I'm not quite sure what happened, and that needs looking into bravely by Nottingham, I would say, brethren and ex-brethren, as to whether Bruce Hales, as he always does, was conducting the matters. When Ray had his accident, he was called out. There's an emergency at work. He'd had a drink one Saturday evening. He did exactly what I could have done, jumped in his car, responded to the emergency, the alarm, and was going a bit fast and got out of control and took responsibility, I think, as far as I understand the situation. Yeah, I was wrong. I was driving too fast, and clobbered, went into a guy and killed him, coming the other way, I think. So what do? Do we join the judgment parade, or do we empathise with Ray and all he's going through? That's what Christians do. They empathise with people when they get things wrong and set them up to healing. Oh no, says Keith Birch, the government of God's on Ray is a very serious matter when he was in jail. So I rang up one day, Greg Hibbert. I said, who's advocating for Ray? And he said, oh, nobody. So I said, right, I'll advocate for him. I'll come down and we'll involve Mike Fowler in the matter. So he did that. I went down, went to Greg's house, dropped down to Mike's. He was at work. His dear wife called him round, and when he was there, I rang Keith Birch to say we were going to see Ray in the workplace. He had a day off out of the prison. He was at one of the South's businesses premises in Derby, and Bruce and Keith Birch says, "What are you doing? Why are you doing this?" I said, "Oh, because I just want to be an advocate for Ray. He's a decent chap. I like him." And he says, "Well, has Garth given you permission?" I said, "This is a Nottingham matter, nothing to do with Garth." So that obviously miffed Keith Birch, because he was taking his instructions from Garth. And this is the layers of hierarchy: Bruce Hales to Garth to Keith Birch. And this is what comes out time and again. And when I was called in to see brethren all over the country, not all over, but a number of different places, invariably the problem was the hierarchy. And I would say so. I would say, "Sorry, you're okay, you're fine. I understand why you've got a drink problem. I understand why you've had a nervous breakdown. It's because the hierarchy are giving you hell." And I knew all about that from the Leeds hierarchy. So here we are. We move on, and begrudgingly, Mike Fowler spoke to Keith Birch, somewhat begrudgingly let us go and see Ray. Then we went back to report to him and his brother Stuart, afterwards, and they were as miserable as sin, because we'd interfered. Well, we hadn't, had we? I was involving two Nottingham brothers, and Mike was probably the stablest brother in Nottingham. I mean, I don't think it's to go to Mike Fowler and work with him to try and restore Ray and get him back into fellowship as quick as possible. I think was a perfectly reasonable thing to do. I admired Frank Fowler from a boy, his father. Fowlers are top draw people, and I think I have my right to choose the local brethren I used to help me advocate for Ray. And that was fine until I got to Boston. And of course, I was also taking forward Jim Hutchinson's matters, and I'd been to see Jim's father in a meeting with Jim, his father, and David Smith from Sheffield. And basically, Jim's father apologised for confronting me in that meeting the next morning, just when I was leaving for Boston, and I went off there feeling fairly good, Yeah, I'd intervened, I'd responded to calls for help, and I thought, right, I'd take these matters to the top, to Bruce Hales, and get a "Well done, Lance, thank you for your help." But just the opposite. And I got absolutely lambasted in front of my wife. She was frightened stiff. And then he came round to the house where I was staying. We had quite a chilled out time and had a few jokes and made a few arrangements for school dues to try and pay people back quickly who'd lent money very kindly to buy the York School, which was to serve the Harrogate, Leeds, Middlesbrough and Newcastle brethren, far too far away. Poor kids travelling to school, but it was a good real estate investment. So of course money dictates in that religion. And I tried to get the money together for that project, despite having my misgivings about it, because I believe the Newcastle kids should go to school in Newcastle, the Middlesbrough kids should go to school in Middlesbrough, and the Leeds kids should go to school in Leeds, and the Harrogate in Harrogate, except that I bought a place in Brammer, which was between Leeds and Harrogate, which I offered for the Brethren School, because it seemed sensibly located. But Hales came and blew on that as well, so we had to adjust and went to York. Quite ridiculous, no respect to the distance the kids were travelling. So anyway, despite that, I brought the funding together, wanted to pay it back, got instructions from Hales in Boston, but then apparently on the way home, he instructed the brethren in Leeds to shut me up. Thanks, mate. I'd arranged the Manchester Fellowship meeting with Arthur Lewis, courtesy of a conversation with Bruce Hales that weekend, on the Monday actually, at his business premises in Boston, and he asked me who should serve. And I kind of thought, well, Dick Blackledge preached along with my son Jed after Hales in the all-important meeting at Boston the previous day, so I kind of thought I'd better go along with the Hales thinking, so suggested Dick Blackledge. He said, deal done, clapped his hands. And so I rang Arthur Lewis, and this was Monday night, and the whole meeting was arranged for Wednesday, I think it was. So credit to the Manchester Brethren for arranging it so quickly. And, you feel pretty good, don't you, when you're involved with the top and arranging meetings. Later, Gareth Hales, September that year, that was October 14, September 15, the following year, Gareth Hales suggested that I could give names in for the November group going to hear Bruce Hales. So I did that, and I was knocked back quite hard and fast by Cyril Parsons, who was in charge of the invitations because he ran Hughes Travel Trust, and put a bit of a complaint into Andy Turner, who was also on the Hughes Travel Trust. But basically, my suggestions were, although Hales went along with them when I was speaking to him, man to man, he completely undermined me afterwards. And then, following on that, I got back to England and got this awful letter from Bruce Hales, which I'm trying to find on my phone now. Hang on a minute. Yes. So this was the 15th of October 2014. Dear Lance, I've been reviewing our conversation and discussions since I last spoke to you Monday the 13th at University Avenue, and I've received further reports of your activities. Consequently, I have no doubt before the Lord the judgment I have reached will stand, and that is that you have offended in the following areas. 1. Interference in other local assemblies matters and administration in an unpriestly way. Thank you. 2. Your contacts and activities have sown discord among the brethren and still are. All I was doing was helping people who reached out for help. That's what I do. I do that now. I've got a whole lot of people in Pakistan want me to go and help them and preach over there. I'd already preached them on video, but not to them. I just love them and just try and do what I can. But they wouldn't accuse me of sowing discords. How people receive the word is their matter. It's not my matter. I just speak forgiveness. I love souls. 3, you have persuaded quite a number of brethren to join in with a party established by yourself. Well, I had no idea. That was certainly no motive to start a party. I can say that humbly. I'm sure I can do things better. 4, you are acting independently and proceeding on without the support and in disregard of your local brethren's exercises. So I suppose that means that all the local brethren feel that I shouldn't do anything. And they've told me, that indicates that they've told me that I shouldn't preach or shouldn't go and help people who cry out for help. And I'm acting in disregard of them. Well, in actual fact, he was referring to the hierarchy, which is Garth and Roger Edwards and Chris Tutterheim. And it's very easy for them to be intimidated by Bruce Hales and say I'm bad and interfering and sowing discords, blah, 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 just because Bruce Hales says so. I would like those people to be honest, those 3. Was I really as bad as they made out to the local assembly? I'm speaking strongly. I should be more humble because, look, I'm a failing sinner. I make mistakes. I'm certainly not setting myself up to be anything religiously or spiritually. I'm just Lance. But if my motive is right and I make a few mistakes, those that love me should surely rally and say, look, we know what Lance meant. He's a bit extreme at times, or he gets things a little bit twisted round, but we love him, so, we'll stand up for him. But none of that. None of that. It's much, much, much deeper than that. And as is coming out, and will come out in the investigations by the tax authorities. Now, I'm struggling with my phone again. I tried to print this off inside, but the printer isn't working. Here we are. Got it back. So then it goes on. Strictly speaking, the above constitutes a course of action that renders you liable to be brought before the Assembly in Leeds. Personally, having known you for over 20 years and having sought to take a keen interest in your matters from time to time, I am greatly distressed and burdened to experience your disregard of my own feelings and admonitions. Wow, isn't he great? Matters are outstanding that cannot be left unaddressed and must be put right in a suitable and conclusive manner. And then he goes on to Ray's story. Honestly, I was only wanting to help and advocate for Ray. When he confronted me on the Saturday at Boston, he said, Ray doesn't need your advocacy, nor mine. Well, who was advocating for him? No one. Of course he needs. If I was in jail, I hope that somebody would say, hey, Lance did something good for me back in the day, or just something simple. Are you sure you've got it right? And there are a lot of wrong jailings these days, and good people draw alongside, understand and empathise with people who are in prison, and that's scriptural. You empathise with prisoners, and you actually, in your heart and soul, join them in prison. So you really feel it if your friend goes to prison. In regard to Ray's story, your activities and contact apparently have turned his wife against the local priesthood, who were caring for his matters and her since the start of this terrible episode of trouble. I fear that if this is not fully corrected and reversed completely, then when RS is released from prison, his attitude to the local brethren will cause him to go away and go astray, and most likely may even cause his wife to leave the fellowship. So, blaming me for blaming Ray. Now, I would like to know who's blaming who now. I have not been in touch with Ray once. He very brotherly called me after hearing I was shut up in March 2017. And I went on I couldn't understand it. This was Friday night, so on Saturday I went for a long walk. And he phoned me. And I remembered this letter that had been written to me, so I immediately rang Chris Tutterheim, telling him that Ray had phoned me, just to put it on record, so that that couldn't be held against me. But I think the brethren in Nottingham, and there are ex-brethren, Mark Storey, Phil Stott are two, who could help. And I think the brethren and the ex-brethren should work together, because they will have their aspects. And the brethren may have all been brainwashed into thinking a certain way by Bruce Hales and Garth Christie, his UK man, who was overseeing the matters in Nottingham. So fairness and justice require that we lay the facts on the table. And if Bruce Hales was interfering to contort the facts in the Ray Storey accident matter, he should acknowledge that and acknowledge it to the police, because he's under investigation at the moment, or the tax authorities, and just say this is what happened. And if he said that Ray should say he was innocent when he was guilty, that makes Bruce Hales the man responsible for Ray going to jail, because he may have been let off with a suspended sentence if he told the truth. I'm not saying I wasn't there, but I'm just picking up bits of what I've heard. It needs investigation. I'm not making any prejudgments, but the brethren in Nottingham should look into it closely, bravely, take Bruce Hales out of the question, and just ask themselves whether they've been fair to Ray. Because I can testify that Ray, after he came back, and my intervention did work insofar as Ray did come back when he came out of jail into fellowship, whereas I was saying he'd have to suffer longer. From all reports I had until I left in 2017, Ray was acting admirably. He was behaving himself. He was trying to get back into the favour of his local brethren. He was showing respect to them. He's a good guy, and he may be a bit volatile at times, like some of us tend to be, but he's still a good guy. And this is where the punishing assembly judgment needs reviewing, and the viciousness of separation. I'm not sure whether his wife's left with him or not, but if she hasn't, she will be separated from him. And I'm just going back to this letter and saying the seeds of the division, if they are divided, go back to Bruce Hales. He was the one that orchestrated the whole thing and was trying to use me as a scapegoat in October 2014. So, this terribly sorrowful event at this point in time would be in the main due to your unsavoury and misguided speaking and influence. Oh, thank you. There's no facts given, no evidence. He just makes a judgment. I am sure that you would not want to be responsible for this, and you would not be able to live long enough yourself to be relieved of your own responsibility should this terrible misadventure occur. So if anyone leaves the brethren like I have and others have done since, what a terrible misadventure in their lives. Oh, terrible. He's playing this game to convince those inside who are trapped, actually, they're in servitude to him, how terrible a life you'll have if you leave the brethren. Here I am enjoying the Bathurst countryside and the beautiful people here who are looking after me, and I can go for a swim in the pool. It's just idyllic. So things aren't quite as terribly a misadventure as Bruce Hales is threatening. Nevertheless, it is tough, and I was devastated to get this letter. He then goes on, if you have any respect or love for me, you will bear my word immediately as authoritative and final, humble yourself and submit to the counsel and advice of your local brethren, including the personnel in other assemblies whom you have wronged, without delay. I remain your faithful brother in the Lord, Bruce D. Hales. He told me in an interview in London in June the following year that his wife drew this letter up with him. I think he dictated it and she typed it. Thank you, Jenny. But that's high ground. I would never speak in such a way. I'm feeling pretty fired up today, and perhaps I should show a more humble spirit. Yes, I've been judged by not only my brethren, but by all the brethren comprising the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, 55,000 of them, overnight on the basis of this letter, written by the dictator, I say, of the system. Now, a Brethren Assembly should be a mutual organisation where we love each other. And if I'm deemed to have dropped beneath my calling by advocating for Ray Story and Jim Hutchinson, a few others, David Simpson from Preston, Granville Roberts from Worcester, and a host of others actually, but I don't want to go into that now. If I'm deemed to have done something wrong in my quest to bring justice for those souls, the whole thing needs laying out clearly, factually, with evidence, without me having 27 priestly visits, interrogating me and forcing me to agree to Bruce Hales' judgment. And of course, this was read out in the assemblies at time and again when I was rebuked. And really the issue was that I was not submitting to Bruce Hales' word in this letter. And this letter marks the end of my life in the Brethren, because I had to start sitting back and not preaching and not doing anything worthwhile, couldn't help anybody about anything. I was meant to just sit in that Brethren position until I died. And in a last ditch effort to keep me, Jed said I could have a lovely house on the edge of Leeds, maybe in Woodley, and just keep out of trouble. My wife said, just say you're wrong if you're right, Lance, and we'll have a happy little family going on until the rapture, I suppose. Well, I stand for truth and justice. I step forward, and I could never understand why Hales turned against me so viciously. This was the start of his destroying tactics. He was trying to destroy me as a person. And of course he manages to persuade my wife I'm a bad person, divides the family up, turns my sons against me. They stand up in court against me. And I feel absolutely sorry for them, because they are dancing to his tune. And I brought them up, and I apologise for this and stand judged for this, hold myself accountable for this. I brought my sons up to respect the brethren, which included the hierarchy, despite the fact that I knew things were wrong. And that's what I do. I would never, as I'm doing today, I will share the facts, and so that others can take matters up. But it's not my job to take up matters on my own behalf. Normally the family would do that, but when they're under pressure because of this toxic mix between family and religion and business, and if you've got family and social life and business on one side and little Lance Christie with the truth on another, I'm meant to capitulate and curl up and die. And when they say you're mental and a heretic and all sorts of other slander, all to persuade you and the brethren that you are a bad lot, it kind of crushes your spirit. And if I hadn't got the presence of mind, if I hadn't had the versing, you might say, and the training that the Bible offers, and super commentary on the Bible like Ellicott's, and my link with the Lord, and my sense of the greater, and knowing that the wheels of justice do turn, and if you stand for justice, stand for truth, you will eventually get a result accredited by the law, the country, and divine persons. If I hadn't believed that, I'd have curled up and died and become yet another victim to the vicious administrative system of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. So I'm standing here now, you might say, in the centre of PBCC history, or exclusive Brethrenism, or Brethren history, and saying, look, the Brethren movement is fragmented. I understand why, because it becomes untenable. You've got to leave, because you're in trouble. So I'm not going to start another religion, but I'm just saying, look, reform, changed. That's what the judge, he gave me that mandate in November in the Leeds courts. Reform the PBCC. Well, it needs transformation. It needs a change of mind. It needs respect for every individual member of the PBCC, not one above the other, so that the hierarchy is broken down, and quite simply, those that lord judgment over others just become ordinary members sat with the brethren, acknowledging their sins and pleading to the Lord for mercy. And that's how we get the victory, by letting the light of Scripture, the light from heaven, you might say, into the situation, and arranging yourself humbly before Almighty God. And God is love. He loves it. When we repent, there's joy in heaven over one repenting sinner. Just imagine how much joy there would be over 55,000 repenting sinners. And that's simply it. My motivation is reconciliation, but that requires repentance. We can't reconcile if the brethren in Leeds are saying that I'm sowing discords, and I'm saying I don't understand it, because that's like a gulf between us, isn't it? And I can't go back with a matter not being looked into. We can't sweep that under the carpet. It's become a major issue. I spent £2.5 million pulling myself together with the help of the legal system and other brethren who have been treated in a similar way to me. And that balance between the forces, you might say, should actually cause the brethren to review the way they are treating members. I'm suggesting right back to the way G.R. Cowell, and I've written into the British government about this very clearly, when G.R. Cowell was dubbed rival, that was very much like Bruce Hales dubbing me a sower of discords, independent, leading a party. How you can be independent and leading a party, I'm not quite sure. Nevertheless, so he's judging me just like Jim Taylor judged G.R. Cowell when he tried to slow down the introduction of separation. And it was wrong. The whole separation, as John Howard told me last year, is objectionable. That whole separating family members because they've upset the leader of what's become a cult can't be right. Family is precious. I love my kids. I love my grandkids. My dear little Kiri, she's had a baby. Not been told anything about it. Kiri's down, I don't know where she lives, like Bedford or Biggleswade or somewhere, but she's married into a lovely family, Julian Bushnell. And I'm very happy about that, but I want to see her. There's no reason why I should be separated from my lovely family. I love my family, and I can't convey that enough. I'm a lover. And if they came, oh, you might influence them against Bruce Hales. Well, I'll speak the truth. I'm not going to be, oh, I won't say this and I will say that. That's what Charlotte Harris, the Kingsley Napoli lawyer, said to me. She kind of came for a reconciliation meeting. Well, maybe we could arrange an artificial meeting with you and Jed so that you can get a bit of reconciliation. I said, I don't want that. I just want the freedom and happiness and joy that a father enjoys with his son and his daughters. I've got 3 super daughters. Heidi Preston is magic, and Zoe is the most wonderful mother you could imagine. Boyd was quite a lad in his day, but she calmed him down, and they're the loveliest family. And their kids, I haven't seen them, my own grandkids, for over 7 years now. How can that be right? So I'm appealing to the brethren to stop breaking up families. My father was devastated when I left at 16. Of course, when you're that age, you don't understand. You think you're doing the right thing, because like me, I instilled respect for all the brethren into my own children. My father instilled that same respect into me. Garth, as a 15-year-old, was determined to leave home as quick as he could. So on his 16th birthday, as soon as it was legal, he beetled off and left my poor parents. So that was half their sons gone, thanks to Symington saying that my father was a bad man. I've heard some terrible allegations akin to these. The most ambitious man in Christendom. Now, of course, the brethren don't tell me that when I'm 16. It was Dr. Burrows, who was a decent guy who spoke sense in the local meeting, who told me that he'd said that. Also that James Christie can't keep the Red Indians in control. Therefore, he can't run the local meeting. My father was the gentlest father. He was the kindest father. He bore with a lot. We were rips. We're all over the place. But the brethren laughed and loved it, to be honest. Cedric got up and gave a word in the supper, which was taken up in the reading, not long before my parents were booted out. And Ralph was pretty intelligent in the brethren, but, pretty naughty. But hey, we cope with those things. Somebody said to me, an inside brother said to me a couple of weeks ago, "You're a naughty boy, Lance," but we like it. So we love naughty boys, and I can't believe that Boyd and Zoe's boys and their lovely girl Orla are anything but a bit naughty. But hey, if Lance is a bit naughty, hey, just don't judge me and chuck me out and have nothing to do with me. Just cope with a bit of naughtiness, because actually it shows that you've got a lively spirit and you've got a bit going on and you've got a bit of something, a bit of personality. So let's not judge one another. Let's love one another.